My name is Paige Whitaker. I'm 35, and at my grandfather's will, reading my family handed my sister a check for $6.9 million and slid me a single dollar bill across the table. My mother laughed when she saw my face. My father said, "Go earn your own." Then my mother leaned in, smiling like she'd waited years to say it, and told the whole room, "Some kids just don't measure up." Lauren waved her check. My parents toasted with the lawyer's bad coffee. I let them laugh. I picked up the dollar and I said, "Thank you," because I knew what was still sitting in the lawyer's folder, and they didn't. There was one more document, a letter my grandfather wrote in his own hand and asked to be read out loud. 40 seconds after the lawyer opened it, my mother stopped laughing for good. Welcome back to Peaceful Life Narratives, where the granddaughter who unlocked the shop at 6 every morning and never told a soul what she carried finally gets to tell you what was waiting in that lawyer's folder. If you've ever been handed a dollar while someone else got the millions, stay right here because the old man had one more thing to say. Drop a comment and be sure to subscribe. 4 years before that dollar, I was a high school teacher. I taught business and shop in a town 2 hours north, and I was good at it. And I thought that was my whole life. Then my grandfather fell. I want you to understand who I became after that because my family never bothered to find out. I'm the kind of person who, when something needs doing, just does it quietly and doesn't announce it. That sounds like a virtue. It's actually a weakness, and it cost me for years because I let everyone assume I disappeared into some small, sad life out in the country. I didn't correct them. I've never been good at saying, "Here is everything I carry." I just carried it. My grandfather, Earl Whitaker, owned a hardware and lumber store that had stood on the main street of our town for 50 years. Whitaker Hardware. Everyone in 3 counties knew it. When I was a girl, I did my homework on the counter while he cut keys and gave kids free penny candy. That store was the steadiest thing in my childhood. Steadier than my parents' marriage, steadier than anything. So when Pop got sick and the question became who would keep the lights on and who would keep him safe, I didn't hold a family meeting about it. I gave notice at my school in the middle of a semester, packed my car, and drove back to the little cottage behind his farmhouse. My mother told her friends I'd thrown my career away. My father didn't say much at all. Neither of them asked what it actually took. They'd find out eventually in a lawyer's office when a dead man's letter said it for me. Let me tell you about the store because the store is the whole story. Whitaker Hardware opened at 6 in the morning every morning, the way it had since 1974. Farmers came in before dawn for parts that would save their whole day. Pop believed a hardware store was a promise to a town, and you didn't break a promise just because the sun wasn't up yet. When I moved back, I started opening it. 6 a.m. key in the lock, lights on, coffee going, the smell of cut wood and machine oil. I do the store, then go check on Pop, then back to the store, then back to Pop. He still came in when he could, slower every month, and he'd sit on the stool by the register and watch me ring people up. And one morning, he said something I never forgot. "You know how I'll always know who this place belongs to?" He said, "It belongs to whoever opens it every morning." I thought he was being sentimental. He wasn't. He was telling me something plainly, the way he told me everything. And I was too tired and too used to being overlooked to hear the full weight of it. The store wasn't fancy. Some months it barely cleared its own costs, but it employed 4 people in a town that didn't have many jobs. And it kept a 50-year promise, and it had my grandfather's name over the door. To my parents, it was a dusty building sitting on land that could be sold. To me and to Pop, it was the realest thing our family had ever built. Those 2 ways of seeing it were about to collide in a lawyer's office with a dead man holding the gavel. The fall came on a Tuesday in October 4 years ago. Pop slipped on the loading dock at the store, and at the hospital, they didn't just set his wrist. They watched the way his hand trembled, and they ran tests, and the word came back. He was 84 then. The doctor was kind and direct. Pop could live a good while yet, but he'd need more help every year, and he could not run a 50-year-old business and manage a disease at the same time. Somebody had to step in. I was on the phone in the hospital hallway within the hour, calling my parents, calling my sister. My mother said, "Oh, that's so hard, honey, but you know, your father and I can't just drop everything. We have the house, we have our lives." My sister Lauren, who lived in the city 90 minutes away with no children and a job she complained about, said she'd try to come up when things settled down. Things never settled down for Lauren. There was always a trip, a new apartment, a reason. I stood in that hallway and did the math everyone in my situation eventually does. There were 3 of us who could have stepped up. There was one of me who would. I didn't resent it that first day. I want to be honest about that. I loved Pop, and I'd have chosen him over a semester of lesson plans every time. What I resented, what built slowly over the next 4 years, like water behind a dam, was the way my family treated my showing up as proof that I had less of a life to interrupt, as if being the dependable one meant I was worth less, not more. My parents visited Pop maybe 3 times a year, and I started to notice a pattern in those visits. They never asked how he was sleeping or whether his medication was working, or if he was lonely in the evenings. They asked about the land. The first time it happened plainly, my father stood at the window of the farmhouse looking out at the 40 acres behind the store and said to no one in particular, "You know what that acreage is worth now with the new highway going in?" My mother picked it up like a dropped thread. "Earl, have you thought about what happens to all this? You don't want it to be a burden on the kids," she said. "The kids?" She meant the money. Pop, who was sharper than any of them gave him credit for, just said, "I've thought about everything, Lorraine, don't you worry." And he winked at me across the room. And I didn't understand the wink yet. They were already counting it. Every visit, the same careful circling. What's the store bringing in? What's the land appraised at? Have you talked to anyone about selling? They framed it as concern, the way people do when they want something, but need to feel generous about wanting it. And every time I'd watch Pop deflect, and I'd watch them leave, a little frustrated, and I'd go back to opening the store at 6 and crushing his pills into applesauce at night. I didn't say anything to them. That was my mistake and my nature both. I just filed it away the way I file everything away. And I kept watching because I was starting to understand that when Pop was gone, the people who never came would arrive with their hands out, and somebody needed to be paying attention. Lauren came around more than my parents, but only because Lauren needed money more than my parents did. She'd show up every few months, always with a crisis, always with a number, a car repair, a deposit, a bridge until the next paycheck. And every time she'd find a quiet moment with Pop, and she'd come out with a check. I never begrudged Pop helping her. It was his money and his heart. What got me was the way she talked about the store on her way out the door. "I don't know how you stand it here," she said to me once in the parking lot, sliding a check into her purse. "This dusty little money pit. You gave up a real career for this." The store had just cut a key for a single mother who'd locked herself out of her house at midnight, and Pop's name was over the door, and my sister called it a dusty money pit while she pocketed his money. I said something neutral. I always said something neutral, but I remember standing there watching her drive off and thinking, "You see a money pit, and I see the only thing this family ever built that was worth preserving." We were looking at the same building and seeing opposite things, and one of us was going to be very surprised someday about which view Pop shared. I went back inside, and Pop was at the register, and he'd heard the whole thing through the open door. He didn't say anything for a minute. Then he said, "Money runs through some people like water through a sieve. You hold things, that's different." I thought it was just a kind thing to say to a worn-out granddaughter. It was a clue. I kept missing the clues. The full insult, the one that became a kind of family anthem, came at Thanksgiving 3 years ago. We were all at the farmhouse, and I'd cooked because of course I'd cooked. And I'd also given Pop his evening medications between the turkey and the pie, because of course I had. Lauren was telling everyone about a promotion that I'm fairly sure never actually happened. My mother was glowing at her. And then the conversation turned to me the way it always did, like a spotlight swinging to the corner of the room nobody wanted to look at. "And how's the little store, Paige?" my mother asked in that voice. I said it was good, steady. She made a small sound, a sort of pitying hum. "I just think it's such a shame," she said to the table, not to me. "You had a teaching career, a real profession, and you threw it away to play shopkeeper in the middle of nowhere." She shook her head. "I love you, honey, but I'll be honest, some kids just don't measure up to their potential. That's just life." The table went quiet for a second. Then somebody passed the gravy, and the moment closed over like water. Nobody defended me. My father studied his plate, and I sat there with the taste of my own cooking in my mouth, and I understood fully and finally how my mother measured a human being. Dollars, titles, the story you could tell at a party. By that math, I was a failure, and Lauren was a success. And the fact that I was keeping her father-in-law's life's work breathing didn't enter the calculation at all. I didn't argue. I just thought one day the math is going to get corrected. I had no idea Pop had already done the correcting. That winter, Pop got worried, and his worry is what started everything. We were sitting in the farmhouse kitchen one night, him with his tea, me with my exhaustion, and he was having one of his clear evenings, the kind where the disease stepped back and let him be entirely himself. "Paige," he said, "when I'm gone, they're going to come for the store." He didn't have to say who. We both knew. Your father will want to sell the land. Lauren will want her cut in cash, and they'll do it fast before the ground's even settled because they don't see what it is. They see what it's worth. I said I knew. He looked at me a long time. I built that place from nothing. My father ran a stall. I ran a store. And I always thought one of mine would keep it going. But it isn't going to be your father. And it sure isn't going to be Lauren. He set his cup down. It's been you for 4 years. 6 o'clock in the morning, every morning. I see it. Then he asked me the question that changed my life. If I make sure it goes to you the right way so nobody can break it, will you keep it open? I should have felt triumphant. I didn't. I felt the weight of it because keeping a 50-year promise is not a gift. It's a responsibility. And it doesn't come with $6.9 million. But I looked at the man who'd been the steadiest thing in my life, and I said yes. And I said something else. The practical thing. The thing my family would later twist into proof I'd schemed. I said, if we're going to do this, Pop, we have to do it so airtight that nobody can ever claim you weren't yourself when you decided. I knew what my family would do if Pop simply left me the store in his will. They'd say he was sick. They'd say the Parkinsons had taken his mind. They'd say I'd manipulated a vulnerable old man. And they'd drag it through a courtroom for years. And they might even win because juries feel sorry for grieving families. And a quiet granddaughter makes an easy villain. I'd watched enough of the world to know that the truth doesn't defend itself. You have to build a wall around it while you still can. So I told Pop we needed a lawyer, a real estate and estate attorney, someone with no connection to the family. And I told him we needed his doctor involved on the record, certifying that he knew exactly what he was doing. He laughed at me a little. "You're thorough," he said. "Pop," I said, "I learned it from watching this family circle your land for 3 years." He stopped laughing and nodded. The next week, I drove him to the office of a lawyer named Howard Lind, and I sat in the waiting room while they talked because I didn't want to be in the room. I didn't want anyone to ever say I'd been whispering in his ear. What they decided in that office over the next 2 months is the thing my parents never saw coming. It was sitting in Howard Lind's files the whole time they were planning how to spend their inheritance. Here is what they did 2 years before the will reading. While Pop could still drive himself to town, they didn't put the store in his will. Putting it in a will would have been the weak way, the contestable way. Instead, Howard Lind structured a sale, a buy-sell agreement. Pop sold Whitaker Hardware and the 40 acres to me at a fair appraised value while he was alive and certifiably of sound mind. I couldn't pay 6 figures in cash, obviously. So the agreement was built the way family business transfers often are. I signed a promissory note. I'd pay it down over years out of the store's profits and my own labor, the same way Pop's own father had passed things down. In plain terms, I bought the store. I'm still paying for it. It was not a gift that fell out of the sky. It was a debt I took on willingly with my name on a note and my 6 in the mornings as the down payment. And the crucial part, the part Pop insisted on, was the medical certification. His physician, Dr. Nessa Holt, examined him and documented in writing that on the day he signed, Earl Whitaker understood the nature and consequences of the transaction completely. Howard had it notarized. He had witnesses. He built the wall exactly as high as I had asked him to, and then a little higher. When it was done, Pop shook my hand like we'd closed a deal at the lumber counter, which I suppose we had. "Now they can scream all they want," he said. "It's done and it's clean. I didn't tell a soul, not my parents, not Lauren, not even my closest friend. I just kept opening the store at 6. People ask me why I didn't say anything for 2 whole years, why I let my mother call me a failure at holiday dinners when I was holding a deed she'd have killed for. The answer is strategy, and it's the part of myself I'm least sure how to feel about. I knew that the moment I announced the store was mine, the war would start. And it would start while Pop was still alive and fragile. My parents would pressure him. They'd corner him on his bad days, the days the disease fogged him, and they'd try to get him to fix it, to undo it, to be fair, and the stress might break him faster than the Parkinsons, or they'd lawyer up early and start building a case that he'd been incompetent. And every month that passed with the disease progressing would make that case easier to argue. The wall Howard built was strongest if nobody attacked it until Pop was gone and the medical record was frozen in time, dated back to when he was clearly sound, so I stayed quiet. I absorbed the insults, I let them count their inheritance out loud at my grandfather's bedside, and I crushed his pills into applesauce. And I said nothing because silence was the only way to protect both the man and the promise. It was the loneliest 2 years of my life. There were nights I wanted to scream the truth across the dinner table just to watch their faces. I never did. I learned from watching my family that the people who talk the most usually have the least, and the ones who hold their cards tend to keep their houses. So I held mine, and I waited for a room with a lawyer in it. I don't want to skip over those 2 years like they were just a waiting room because they were the hardest and best years I've had. Caring for someone you love as they fade is a strange kind of privilege. The mornings were the store, the evenings were Pop. I learned to read his medication windows like weather, the good hours and the hard ones. I learned which stories he wanted on the bad nights, the one about the flood of '78, the one about meeting my grandmother at a church social. I bathed him when he couldn't, and I never once let him feel ashamed about it because shame is the cruelest thing you can add to a body that's already betraying someone. Meanwhile, Lauren posted photos from a beach in Mexico and tagged it, "Treat yourself." My mother sent a card on his birthday and didn't visit. I'm not telling you this for sympathy. I'm telling you because at the will reading, those same people would sit across a table and act like they had any standing at all to talk about what Pop wanted, when not one of them had sat with him through a single hard night. There's a particular anger that builds in a caregiver, quiet and deep. And it isn't really about the money, it's about the audacity. The audacity of people who send a card and then expect to inherit a kingdom. I never let that anger control me. I'd learned that the angry one in the room is the one who loses control of it. But I kept it banked the way you bank a fire overnight so there's still heat in the morning. I was going to need it warm for one particular afternoon in Howard Lynn's office. Near the end, on one of his last, clear nights, Pop gave me a tin box. It was an old one, the kind that used to hold hard candy, dented at one corner, and he kept it in the bottom drawer of his dresser. He put it in my hands with both of his. The way you hand someone something that matters. When Howard calls everyone in to read the will, he said, "You bring this. Don't open it before then unless you have to, and don't let them see it until the lawyer's done his part." His voice was thin that night, but his eyes were absolutely clear. "Promise me you'll let the lawyer read my letter out loud. All of it, in front of everyone." I promised. I asked him what was in the box, and he just smiled. That lumber counter smile. The smile of a man who'd closed a good deal. Insurance, he said, and the truth, in case anybody's forgotten how to recognize it. He passed away 11 days later in his own bed in the farmhouse, with me holding his hand and the store key in my pocket because I had opened up that morning like always. The last thing he said to me wasn't profound. It was, "Did you get the dock light fixed?" I told him I had. He nodded, satisfied, like a man whose affairs were in order, which they were more than anyone but me and Howard Lynn knew. I sat with him a long time after. Then I went home to the cottage, and I put the tin box on my kitchen table, and I looked at it for an hour without opening it. I'd promised to wait, but I was starting to understand that my grandfather had built me something stronger than a store. He'd built me a way to finally be seen. I broke my promise a little. 2 days before the reading, I opened the tin box because I needed to know what I was walking into. I'm going to tell you exactly what was inside because I want you to hold it in your mind for the rest of this, the way I've held it ever since. 3 things. The first was a copy of the buy-sell agreement, the one I'd signed 2 years before, transferring Whitaker Hardware and the 40 acres to me. Pop's signature, my signature, Howard's stamp, the date in clear black ink from a time when no one could pretend his mind was gone. The second was Dr. Holt's certification, her professional letterhead, her statement that on the day of signing, my grandfather understood completely what he was doing, the wall in 2 pages. And the third thing was a note handwritten on a torn half sheet of the store's order paper, the kind we used at the lumber counter. His handwriting had gotten shaky by then, but every word was legible. And I've read it 1,000 times since. The store stays with whoever opens it every morning. I changed nothing on my deathbed. I changed it while I could still drive. Anybody who calls that manipulation never once made the drive themselves. Love, Pop. I sat at my kitchen table and I didn't cry. Not right then. I just felt something settle into place, something that had been crooked my whole life finally going straight. He hadn't left me the store. People kept saying it that way later, that he left it to me, and it always made me correct them. He didn't leave it to me in a will, soft and contestable. He sold it to me on paper 2 years before anyone was watching. And then he sat back and let my family count their money out loud, knowing the whole time that the thing they actually wanted was already gone. The dollar they'd hand me wasn't the insult, it was the punchline. And with that, we've reached the end of today's story on Peaceful Life Narratives. If this moved you, share it with someone who showed up when it counted. Drop your thoughts in the comments below, and don't forget to subscribe. The store is still open. 6 in the morning every morning, just like Pop always said it should be.